Okay, so now you've seen how we've taken our original for loop and created an abstraction around the idea of doing something to each item in an array. Now, we can take that abstraction one step further because, honestly, just putting each item into a function isn't always very helpful unless you're going to do this where you create a fatter function and you do a whole bunch of stuff inside here. That's cool. But we want to continue making abstractions because there are a lot of useful abstractions that we can make. The next abstraction I want to make is called map. Map is similar to forEach in that it takes an array and a function, but this time it returns a new array with the result of passing each item from the original array into the function. So it's a little bit more useful depending on your use case. Whoops. Baby's drinking water. Okay, that's good. So how do we want our function map to work? We know that we want it to return a new array. So we'll create that right at the beginning. And we know that we need to iterate. Oh, you okay, Cassie? Baby's drinking some water. That's good. Hydration is important. So we know that we need to iterate over each item of our array. So we can use our forEach, pass the array into the forEach. We get each item out of the array. I'm going to use a fatter function here. And now what do we want to do? We want to put each item into the function that we're given in our arguments, and then push the result into our new array. Simple enough. New array.push fn item. Now at the end of this, we need to return the new array. Great. Now this time, instead of putting a console log inside our forEach, which is a little silly, we can say let squares equal map numbers square. Now, the only new code here is map and let squares, so we'll drop those into our console and see what we get. Absolutely nothing. That's interesting. Ah, yes, right. That's correct, right? Because we're not returning anything anyway here. We're taking the result of map and storing it in squares. Now, when we check the value of that variable, we can see that our squares are now stored in the new array. Okay, now that we've got our forEach and our map function, let's try using them to actually do something in the browser. So I've made this simple HTML file, which imports script.js, which contains my forEach and my map function, as well as another class that I just created. And we have a window.onload handler here, which will fire when this HTML page is loaded. And so far, in this function, we just have an array of people objects. So you can imagine this as maybe the return value from an API call to the server to get users from a database or something like that. It's very simple. Each object in the array has a name and an age. So what we want to do is render these objects in HTML onto our blank HTML page right here. You can see currently it doesn't do anything. When I refresh the page, it's still just a blank page. Not very interesting. So let's take a look at the class that I made. It's a very simple class called view. You can see the only other things in this file now are forEach and map. And we have a class now called view. And the constructor takes a data object. It creates an element, which is just a DOM node of type div. And it also stores the data. And we have a render method, which takes the data and creates an HTML string with it and sets that HTML string as the inner HTML of the element. Pretty simple, right? So how can we use these three things together to put some HTML on this blank page? Now, first of all, we've got an array of people objects. Let's convert that array of people objects into an array of views. So, as you remember, let's call them people views. The map function takes an array and a function, and it returns a new array. So in our function, we're going to take each person object from this array, and we're going to return a new view with that person as the data for that view. Okay. What this is going to do is create a new array called people views, which is an array of instances of this class where each person from our array is the data element in that class. Okay, great. Next, we want to use our forEach. Don't forget about your handy dandy forEach here. And for each of those people views, what are we going to do? All right, we get a view here. First of all, we need to call the render function, which generates our HTML string and sets it as the HTML of the element. So we do view.render. And then what? Well, we can use the window.body and append child view.element. So this will append the div element of each view, which now has the HTML string as its inner HTML. It will append that to the body of the window. Great, so we've used map to transform an array of data into an array of views, and we used forEach to do something with each of those views, in this case, render it and append its element onto the window. Now, let's refresh index.html and see what happens. Nothing. Interesting. Aha. Right. We want to use document.body. There we go. Let's try that again. Okay. Now we can see the data is rendered in each element and appended to the window. And there you have it. We've got a really simple programmatic generation of HTML using forEach, map, and a simple view class.